Hello, this is Joshua for Frost Dragon Designs, and today I'd like to talk to you about my rocket science cat, Hard Enamel pin. This pin is part of my More Cats Doing Science collection. The More Cats Doing Science pin collection features more than 35 designs of cats doing science and science-adjacent activities. Now let's get into the design. I really enjoy the rocket science cat pin design. Part of it is because, as a kid, I used to do some model rocketry with my father. Now, we weren't like super into it, but we would buy kits, we would put them together, we'd go down to the park and, launch rockets for a little while, and just, it was neat, as a kid to see something that looked like, a little toy rocket that we had built, to see it actually function, was awesome. Now, model rockets zip off super fast off their launch pad, whereas, full-scale rockets almost feel like they're taking forever to get off the ground because they're, so massive, and the thrust required can only accelerate them so quickly because of that large mass. But, as a kid, it's weird. People would say, like, well, it's not rocket science. And so, even as a kid without knowing what rocket science is, that gives you the impression rocket science is difficult. But I didn't really understand why or how. It didn't quite make sense to me. I was like, well, is it like the model rockets? We build it, we put it together, and off it goes. So how hard could rocket science be? But as an adult, it's interesting to understand that rocket science is challenging, and there is a lot of math involved in rocket science. Everything from the design of the actual launch vehicle. If it's a manned mission, you have to worry about, the actual life support systems and that sort of thing. You have to worry about structural integrity. And then what I find most interesting is what is it called? I think it might actually be called the rocket equation. So here's the deal. To launch a certain amount of weight into space, you need a certain amount of fuel to provide the thrust for that, right? So, but here's the catch. The fuel that you have then loaded onto your rocket to launch that initial mass, guess what? Surprise! It has mass of its own that needs to be accounted for. So you need to then provide fuel for the fuel, but then that new fuel that you just added also needs fuel to launch it into space. So when you're starting off on the ground, you need an exponentially larger amount of fuel to get the rest of the fuel that you're going to be using for the rest of the mission up into space. So you might see the challenge here if you're graphing it out. They use integral calculus, which I do not remember very well. But, if we were to look at this, graph out the amount that you need, it's an exponentially steeper incline that you are creating, because every amount of fuel that you need to add adds more mass, which means you need to add more fuel. So there's this huge issue of diminishing returns. Likewise, as you are expending your fuel on your mission, your launch vehicle becomes less and less massy. So there's the rocket problem, and it makes it quite challenging to figure out, what's needed. So there was a Russian scientist in the late 1800s who figured this out using integral calculus, and functionally, that same equation that he initially discovered or put together is what still governs, how they set up rocket missions today. And I think that's cool. It doesn't matter, what we change in society, the math stays the same. And I think that's something kind of cool about math. Math are like factual laws. They do not change. We might discover a new way to manipulate them, but math is a constant. Anyway, if you've enjoyed hearing me talk and watch me design this pin, please go ahead, like, and subscribe. I put out a new video at least once a week, and I would love to have you along for the next one. So thank you so much for your time, and have a great rest of your day.